This segment focuses on how political elites may be identified and what they do. The author Robert D. Putnam, who is more popularly known for his book on social capital, Bowling Alone, asks the question of who rules from an empirical perspective. In the words of our author, two distinct conceptions of power appear in both social science and common parlance. Power as the ability to influence other individuals, and power as the ability to influence collective decision making. However, at the same time asking the question of who has power and rules, Putnam appreciates first that words can mean what you want them to, so having solid definitions of concepts and measures is an important first step. He also recognized that asking what is, in an empirical sense, should not lead to inferring what ought to be, but can influence our assumptions. As a result, public policy theorists and analysts continue to ask this question, albeit with different and better methods. Different authors present differing beliefs concerning elitism and the roots of this behavior. First, Robert Michaels makes the argument that some individuals acquire skills of leadership, whereas followers are accepting of others leading them more by custom. In this sense, there is an acquiescence by individuals to be followers as a result of socialization of its acceptance. This can be seen as more of a nurturance perspective. Vilfredo Pareto, by whom the Pareto optimum in economic theory was developed, asserts that an index of individuals may be created by ranking their share of any good, whether it be wealth, skill, or political power. In this case, leadership stems from the natural distribution of leadership qualities that are innate. Finally, Suzanne Keller makes the argument that the elite are necessary for a society to not disintegrate. Here, elites are the necessary part of the structure of a society because of the increasing complexity of a system with multiple different sectors. The basic principles of political power is that, like social goods, power is distributed unequally. As stated by Pareto, the fundamental aspect of this is that people can be ranked by the share of goods they have and placed into two categories, those with power and those who have none. In other words, we have the elite and then all the rest. The elite are further bifurcated into the governing elite, who have significant political power, and the non-governing elite, who might be seen as the powerless. But this does not mean these elites do not have the potential to exert power, especially as the elite can be seen as having a shared identity. The elite are internally homogeneous, unified, and self-conscious. They know each other well, have similar backgrounds, and share values, loyalties, and interests. Because they are a class that keeps itself apart from society, the elite is largely self-perpetuating and drawn from an exclusive segment of society, and can be seen as essentially autonomous, answering to no one else. In the words of James Mizell, there are 3 C's that can sum up the elite: consciousness, in other words, group consciousness, coherence, and conspiring together in the sense of having common intentions. And when they do bring outsiders in, there is a 4th C, the co-optation of these individuals into the elite and their values. As discussed at the beginning of this segment, power can be seen at 3 different levels. The first level is the most proximate, with power being the ability to influence other individuals. Next is the ability to influence collective decision-making, which in turn leads to the third most obvious point of political science study, the probability of influencing the policies and activities of the state. The scope of power can be seen as implicit, when those who have power have their reactions being anticipated. As a result, power need not be exerted overtly and coercively. However, from time to time, those holding power must revalidate their claims by exerting their power. Potential power is connected as noting some entity that has the ability to influence policy and doesn't do so. This power may be exercised directly when an actor participates in a final decision that leads to policy. It may be exercised through indirect influence when an actor influences another person who participates in the final decision. And finally, it may be exercised through both direct and indirect influence. However, being aware that when policy decisions coincide with an actor's preference, this does not necessarily indicate indirect or direct influence, but may be spurious influence and just happen by chance. Power may be seen as distributed in what appears to be more or less of a pyramid, although this distribution may differ in height, with great differences between the upper and lower strata of society. It may also differ in the profile of distribution in which what portion and how many fall in each category differs. Finally, it may differ in the stability of power distribution, changing incrementally or rather radically. At the very top of this distribution falls those who are the proximate decision makers, those who we can identify as making the decisions. The next stratification level down are those influentials, who have substantial indirect and implicit influence, and which may be seen as comprised of high-level bureaucrats, large landowners, industrialists, financiers, and so on. The next level involves those activists taking part in politics. The group under that are those in the attentive public who know the players of the political game and the outlines of the game itself, but don't play the political game directly. Next, in what may be assumed as the most populated strata of society, we have voters who support the system by taking part in systemic activities, but don't necessarily have that much impact. Finally, we have the non-participants who might not know or care about how power is distributed in a certain area. The next question concerns how does one define elites in terms of the individuals who exert power? In other words, can we identify them? Positional analysis would argue that individuals in high positions of authority in formal institutions of government are those that have power due to their holding these roles. In the words of C. Wright Mills, to be celebrated, to be wealthy, to have power requires access to major institutions, for the institutional positions men occupy determine in large part their chances to have and to hold these valued experiences. However, this approach may be distorted as power is more than the role structure in authority hierarchies. Reputational analysis would argue that power is more of an interpersonal construct, and uncovering power is based on knowing who to ask and what to ask. Finally, decisional analysis argues that power can be defined by influence over specific government decisions. The problem with this concern issues with analyzing decisions, especially as few important decisions can be studied in detail, and even fewer are recognized public issues. And connected with this is that there is a question of infinite regress. As we attempt to trace the decision back to its source, we might go back very, very far.